Did you ever change your name to something dumb as a kid? Most superheroes have at least one alias. Some even have two, but sometimes it can feel like they are having an identity crisis every time you open a comic book. I'm Andrew Boyd, and today on Top 10 Nerd, we will be looking at the top 10 superheroes with multiple identities. Every hero on this list has had at least 3 different aliases over the years, so we have a lot to get through. Let's dive right in. Number 10. Donna Troy. Donna was a duplicate of a young Wonder Woman who was created to be a playmate for the young Amazonian princess. She was kidnapped by Dark Angel, who cursed her to live a cycle of countless tragic lives. She was rescued from one of these lives by the goddess Rhea, who made her one of her Titan seeds. She was sent back to Earth with no memories of this, where she became a founding member of the Teen Titans, calling herself Wonder Girl. When she discovered that she was an alien demigod, she abandoned the name Wonder Girl and became Troya. When Diana stepped down as Wonder Woman, Donna took up the mantle for a time until Diana returned to the role. Since then, she has avoided superhero aliases and simply goes by Donna Troy. Number 9. Stephanie Brown. When the young Stephanie Brown discovered that her father was actually the villain Cluemaster, she decided to help bring him to justice. She created a purple costume and helped Batman and Robin spoil her father's plans and took on the alias Spoiler. She continued in this alias despite Batman's disapproval and even formed a relationship with third Robin, Tim Drake. When Tim quit the role of Robin, Stephanie made herself a Robin costume and broke into the Batcave to try and prove herself worthy of the role. Batman decided to give her a chance, made her the 4th Robin, and began training her. This was short-lived, however, and Stephanie was fired for disobeying orders in the field. Wanting to earn her way back into Batman's good books, she took up the Spoiler mantle again and stole a contingency plan from the Batcomputer to try and end organized crime in Gotham. She failed to implement it correctly and accidentally set off a gang war where she almost died at the hands of Black Mask. She faked her death with the help of Leslie Tompkins, but eventually returned to Gotham. When the second Batgirl, Cassandra Cain, quit, Stephanie became the new Batgirl, finally gaining Batman's approval. After the events of Flashpoint, Stephanie is once again working as Spoiler, although she is still considered a Batgirl as she is a member of Barbara Gordon's team of heroes. Number 8. Tim Drake. While we're on the subject of former Robins, let's talk about Tim Drake. When he was a child, he witnessed the death of the first Robin's parents at the circus and later made the connection that Bruce Wayne was Batman and that Dick Grayson had been Robin before becoming Nightwing. After the second Robin, Jason Todd, was killed by the Joker, Tim noticed how much darker and more brutal Batman was becoming and became the third Robin in order to help mellow him out. He became a fan favorite Robin and operated in the role until Bruce Wayne's death. At this point, Dick Grayson became the new Batman and decided that he viewed Tim too much as an equal to make him his sidekick and fired him as Robin, taking Bruce's son Damian on as his Robin. Being a fan of the restaurant, I guess, Tim Drake became Red Robin. He has operated in this position ever since, except for a brief period when he started going by Drake, which, being that that's his real last name, might just be one of the worst aliases I've ever heard. It sometimes feels like DC is unsure what to do with the character now that Damian is Robin, as Tim bounces between identities and costumes a lot. He is currently going by the name Red Robin, but you wouldn't know it to look at him, as he's just wearing a Robin suit with an extra R. Number 7. Moon Knight. I was unsure if I should include Moon Knight, as he doesn't really have aliases so much as an alternate personality disorder, but whatever, I'll just put him near the bottom. When Mark Spector was a child, he discovered that his rabbi was actually a former German SS officer who had deserted at the end of the war and was posing as a rabbi in order to kill members of the local Jewish community. Mark escaped, but the trauma of this caused him to develop dissociative identity disorder. His first alters were Stephen Grant, who invested Mark's meager funds and became a millionaire who funds their superhero activities, and Jake Lockley, a rough and tumble cabbie who uses his position to gather intel on the various crimes going on. Mark became a mercenary and after being critically injured made a deal with the god Khonshu to become his fist and punish evildoers in his name. He developed the superhero personas of Moon Knight as well as Mr. Knight, who is also a hero but wears a posh white suit rather than a big white cloak. Number 6. Monica Rambeau. Monica Rambeau was a Harbor Patrol lieutenant from New Orleans who gained powers when she was trying to retrieve an energy-draining device that had been stolen by the evil Roxxon Corporation. When this failed and she learned that they were planning on using the disruptor to destroy a US Ranger school called Fort Benning, she destroyed the machine. She was bombarded by extra-dimensional energy and she got the power to convert her body mass into any form of electromagnetic energy. The press dubbed her Captain Marvel, and she became the second hero to go by that alias. She joined the Avengers Avengers and operated as Captain Marvel until the son of the original captain, Janice Vell, laid claim to his father's mantle. She agreed and started going by Photon instead. In a weirdly petty move, Janice Vell then stole that name as well. Monica considered the alias Pulsar, but eventually began operating under her own name until she eventually rebranded herself as Spectrum, the alias she still uses today. Number 5. Roy Harper. As a child, Roy Harper was taken in and raised by the Navajo tribe. He was trained by the tribe's shaman to be an archer, and he developed such a passion for the sport that he eventually became extremely skilled in the art. He of course gravitated towards the superhero Green Arrow, who came to the reservation to judge an archery competition. While the hero was around, Roy helped him stop a robbery, showing off his archery skills and causing Green Arrow to comment that Roy was even speedier than him with a bow. He adopted Roy and made him his sidekick, Speedy. The two worked together for a few years, but after Green Arrow abandoned his ward to go traveling with Black Canary and Green Lantern, Roy developed a serious substance abuse problem. When Green Arrow discovered this, he punched his ward and disowned him, leaving him homeless. Roy went cold turkey and worked for the CIA for a while, who taught him to use more modern weapons, and he became Arsenal. He struggled for a long time before eventually joining the Justice League. While working with Green Lantern, Hal almost called him Roy in the field, but saved it at the last minute, calling him Red Arrow. The name stuck for a while until Roy's daughter died, causing him to relapse and start going by Arsenal again. Number 4. Clint Barton. While we're talking about archer superheroes, let's move over to the Marvel side and talk about Clint Barton. He was raised in the circus, where he developed his skills as a marksman and became known as Hawkeye. He started out as a criminal but reformed and joined the Avengers, becoming one of the most consistent members of their roster. He switched aliases once he started taking Hank Pym's growth serum and started calling himself Goliath. This was short-lived, and he soon returned to his Hawkeye codename, although he briefly went by Golden Archer before seeming to settle on Hawkeye. This remained his main alias for several years, although he briefly took on the Goliath identity again. After the death of Captain America, Hawkeye had his next major identity change and became the new Ronin. He kept this identity through the events of World War Hulk, the Secret Invasion, and Norman Osborn's rise to power and the formation of the Dark Avengers. Despite Kate Bishop having taken on the codename as well, Clint decided to become Hawkeye again, sharing the mantle with Kate. Number 3. Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers is the half-human, half-Kree woman who joined the Air Force. She excelled there before eventually becoming an intelligence officer for them and eventually joining NASA. She became romantically entangled with the hero Mar-Vell, who was going by the name Captain Marvel. When her career at NASA fell apart, she became the editor of a woman's magazine called Woman Magazine. After an encounter with the psych Magnetron, she developed a split personality, with the alternate persona becoming the superhero Miss Marvel. The two personas eventually merged, and she continued to operate as Miss Marvel for several years. She was kidnapped by an alien race called the Brood, who used an evolutionary ray to unleash the latent potential of her genetics and made her even more powerful. She took on the name Binary and began traveling the cosmos. Her powers were eventually drained while saving the sun, and she became known as Warbird while she recuperated. She eventually became Miss Marvel again until Mar-Vell was killed, and she took up her old love's mantle, becoming the new Captain Marvel. Number 2. Hank Pym. When Hank Pym discovered particles that allowed him to shrink, he used the technology to become the superhero Ant-Man, one of the founding Avengers. He soon regretted this name as it made him feel inferior to his teammates, and once he further developed his tech and was able to grow into a giant man, he changed his name and began calling himself Giant Man. After briefly retiring, he returned to superheroics with a new codename, Goliath. In a bout of temporary insanity, Hank developed a split personality called Yellow Jacket. He eventually returned to his right state of mind, but continued to use the codename as he could no longer endure the physical strain that came with growing into Goliath. He briefly became Ant-Man again before passing the mantle on to Scott Lang and sticking with his Yellow Jacket alias. He decided to give up the costumed lifestyle and became simply known as the Scientific Adventurer. He eventually took up the Yellow Jacket identity again until the death of his wife, whereupon he took up her name, Wasp, in an effort to honor her. He then became Giant Man again until his death at the hands of Ultron. Number 1. James Hudson. Surprise! This was all just an elaborate ruse to talk about the history of Alpha Flight's leader, James Hudson. When he discovered that the geo-exploration suit that he had developed for Amcam Oil was going to be sold to the Americans as a weapon, James quit his job and started working for the Canadian government and helping them form their superhero team, Alpha Flight. One of his first missions was to capture his old friend Wolverine and bring him back to Canada. During this mission, he was going by the codename Weapon Alpha. In his ensuing fight with the X-Men, he accidentally injured Moira McTaggart, and this is where things get interesting. John Byrne wanted to call this character Guardian, but at the time, the Guardians of the Galaxy books were being published and Marvel wanted to avoid confusion, so they suggested the name Vindicator. In story, James takes up this name to represent the fact that he is trying to make up for injuring McTaggart in his mission. In Marvel Age number 2, John Byrne discusses the fact that he didn't like the name for the character, as it made it sound as though Canada had something to vindicate. By the time Alpha Flight got their own series, Guardians of the Galaxy had been cancelled, so Byrne was allowed to rename the character Guardian. In the story, fellow teammate Shaman suggests the name change, citing the exact same reasons Byrne gave in his Marvel Age interview. Once Guardian was killed off, his wife Heather became the new team leader and started calling herself Vindicator, because she was vindicating the loss of her husband. When it was revealed that he was not dead, but had been transformed into a cyborg, he and his wife switched code names, with him becoming Vindicator again and her becoming Guardian. He was seemingly killed again, and Heather became Vindicator again, and he was brainwashed by the villain, the Master of the World, and became known as Anti-Guard. While this was happening, he had a clone who was operating as Guardian, but when the real Hudson returned and the clone was killed, he took up the mantle of Guardian once again. This is a subject that can easily be explored in a part 2 and beyond, so if there are any other heroes with multiple identities you think I should talk about in the future, make sure to mention them in the comments below. Until then, remember to like and subscribe for more Top 10 Nerd.